While you're busy reading the slide in a foreign language, I'll give you a different one to look at. I'm going to go ahead and get started because people do tend to filter in no matter what you do. And I put these slides up about translating humor for a reason. Humor and poetry are probably the two most difficult things we have to do in our profession. And the only thing more difficult than translating humor is for some wise guy to make a joke that's not in the script while you're doing a simultaneous translation, or as we call the consecutive interpreting. Simultaneous interpreting. And you just have to be ready for it. And I just put these up partly for a chuckle and partly to get you thinking about what you would do in your language pair. So you'll see them in almost all of my presentations. A few administrative notes here about what we're doing. In case you're in the wrong presentation, you're welcome to stay. If you don't really want to hear about it, the seats back there are really comfortable. You just sleep and I won't notice. I can't see a thing back there anyway. I don't know if I'm doing this well or not because I can't see anything. A couple of administrative remarks. If you haven't been here for the opening session or needed it, the restrooms ladies are over there, there's a restroom. For the men, there's an ATM machine. Do not use the ATM machine or the telephone room behind it. It's hidden. You've got to turn left, but it is right behind these seats here. So if you notice a smell in the seats, it's the men's room down below. The other thing, another couple of other things. Let's see. My name is Jonathan Hine. That's how you pronounce the guy in the middle of the screen here. And I have some cards out here. You've been told to be careful about passing out your cards too much. Be discreet. Write something. Of course, you're also going to notice that the mic will go in and out. I'll just shout when that happens. Feel free to write something on the back of my card. In fact, please take a card because I've got to get rid of them. I want to make new ones. All right? But if you write to me, however, mention that you got my card at the IC1 presentation so I don't think you're a crank call or a spammer, okay? And I'll actually read your email. But I welcome your comments later on or questions, things like that. And so there's a pile over here and a pile over there, and I've got another box just like them back in the back of where I'm staying. And you're welcome to them. There's no break, so we're just going to keep going. And I have my timer here. It's set to blow a siren when it's time to leave. A couple of questions. One, how many of you, and I realize I can't see very well with these lights, how many of you have already read my yellow booklet or gotten a copy of it? Good, no hands. Then I can take that into account. How about Corinne McKay's excellent book, How to Succeed as a Freelance Translator? Hands, please. Okay. Corinne will tell you she's got a lot of my material for the chapter with the spreadsheet in it. Okay. But that helps me know that y'all and the people with the hands up have seen some of the principles we're talking about here. They're in that book. If you want to spend $6, you can get my book, or I forget how much her new edition is going for. Then you don't have to take notes, see? It'll all be printed for you. Second, how many of you have never used an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets or a spreadsheet of any kind? No, put your hands up, because I have found out that, there's a whole generation coming along that there's an app for that, and they've never used a spreadsheet. I mean, spreadsheets are going the same place that my old abacus went, okay? So I need to know what that level. Okay, you've never used a spreadsheet. You've never used a spreadsheet. Okay, up there. Anybody else? Okay. Not too many of you, but I'll try to remember the two of you in case this is strange. Or better yet, spreadsheet's just a big table you'd use in a computer program, and it does the math for you. You tell it what formula to use, like cell 1 plus cell 2 goes in here, and so it adds them for you anytime you're playing with them. And often accounting programs will do that too. But if you want to, those of you that never use spreadsheets, talk to me later about it. But I'm going to go ahead, assuming the rest of you are familiar with them, because some of the slides are spreadsheets, and you'll know how to build your own later. And let's see. I can't even read my own notes if I don't put my glasses on anymore. All right. Let me get a sense of how many of us are interpreters, whether you do both or not. Okay, in there. How many of us are translators? Good. How many of us are agency owners? Good. Yeah, project managers? A couple of project managers? That's good. Now, how many of you have mega businesses that are trying to acquire everybody else? Good, good. Yeah, this is not for you. All right. And how many of us live and work outside the United States? In other words, you don't deal with the American IRS. Okay, that looks like about half. The principles are going to be the same, all right? But I'm not going to try to address individual issues for your tax revenue agency, but the principles will be the same. And there'll be some quirk along the lines of what I'm saying that applies to your agency, whatever it is. And a couple more things. One, there's a couple of things. They tell you to hold the questions to the end, but I don't like that because I'm going to try to take your questions as you go. There's two problems. One, I may not be able to see your hand because of the lights. But the other thing is that there are some people who are afraid to ask questions, and even at the end, then they come up at the end, and I can't go to the bathroom, you know what I mean? So if you have a question but you're shy about it, take one of your cards, write the question on the back, pass it up and dump it here, and I'll come over and pick up the questions, and we'll have a time at the end when I make sure I've got all your questions answered, and I'll read the ones you didn't want to ask, didn't want to put your hand up about. I promise not to turn your card over and read your name, okay? But that's a sneaky way to give me your business cards. I used to pass around an attendance sheet, but it got to be too complicated. The other thing about questions is that if I'm going to talk about it, I'll tell you that it's coming up later. I'm not putting you off. Questions. Now, first of all, what brought you here before you knew anything about, after you read in the conference bulletin, what brought you here? I mean, do you have any questions going right into this? Do I see any questions that made you curious? I'll make sure, I'll go back at the end and we'll make sure we got the questions you had now answered in the course of the presentation. Do you have any things that you already wanted to ask right off? Speak up because I don't have a mic for you. I think I priced my work too low, okay? I think I priced too low. Okay, too low. That is probably the whole purpose of this workshop, so I think we'll get to your question. Anyone else have a question that brought them here? What? Could you speak up?
I'm an agency owner, and I would like to better understand the way translators think of the way they price and how to have a conversation with them about it.
Agency owner wants to hold conversation about it, huh? Okay. What are translators thinking, right? Does that kind of catch it? No. No, honestly, it's a two-way street. It's wonderful to have someone like this here because you got to realize every time you think about them, the them is thinking about us. And it becomes a we-them thing. And wait a minute, we're all in this together. One thing you're going to find out, and this is a piece of wisdom from an old translator, we're on teams. You got to remember something. It's not us against our client. Our client generally has a client. And even if you think you have a direct client, like a law firm or a publishing house, that client has its clients. And so we're always teams for the one who really doesn't know what we're doing, okay? So that the translation agency owner knows what we do. But you can trust me, her client does not. And so we're on a team making the best product possible for her delivery someday, okay? So I like the fact that an agency owner wants to know how we think of pricing. Well, you're not going to get that here. You're going to get what I think of pricing. But we're going to have a conversation about it, and we're all going to leave the room with a slightly different idea. I do every time I do this talk. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Yes? Well, we'll do that, because the first part is how to set the price, but how to use that information is crucial. Billing? I'm not going to go into billing and collection in great detail, but I'll show you. You'll get the sense of how to set it up once you've done your price a bit, if we have some time. That's kind of an issue on there, but I'll put that in there as one of the things we'll talk about. Back there, lady doing her hair. No, the one behind her. We have other talks about that. And this is just a small piece of it. It's a very important piece. You need to know your break-even point, which is what I'm going to be talking about. So you need to do this as part of that. But boy, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. there's marketing presentations, look in the program for those, the social media things, stuff like that, and the networking you're doing here is probably the most important thing you're doing. I'll take one more and see if we can fit it in. In the back, yes. I can't hear you if you're just going to sit down. The question is, how do I know if you're going too high or too low?
Yes.
Okay.
There is nothing published, but we cannot, APA cannot disclose.
How to know if I'm too high or too low? We will cover that, because the whole purpose of this talk is to show you that that's not important. We'll find out. Too high or too low. Okay. You should be grateful that I don't have a flip chart today, because I usually put these questions on a flip chart, and then you have to wonder what I wrote. Okay? I think I'll be able to read that later. Oh, let's move on and, sorry about that, folks. There we go. And see what we're going to do here. Next slide, please. So what I hope we're going to do today, the whole idea is to get a new mindset about looking at your business if you're not already running a business. Okay, so that'll be, there's some basic principles to running a business. And we want to find your break-even point. The break-even point is going to be a very important, crucial point of how to set your price. It is the crucial point. You're going to learn that managing time is managing money, and you're going to become, I hope, more sensitive to the value of your time, even the value of the time you spend in the next 46 minutes sitting in here, okay? And then we'll do some practical stuff to the extent that there's some time, okay? Once I get through those first three, we'll see what we've got, and now I'll allow some time at the end for the questions that float up to the front and for the questions you wrote down here before we quit. So without any further ado, let's go on and get with it. All right. I got the questions you came to hear. I did that first. Okay, looking at your business, all right? I guess this slide's kind of about the responsibilities of a CEO. And I'm a financial translator and a legal translator and a literary translator and a technical translator. You know, you give it to me, I'll make up something and give it back to you. So I do just about all that stuff. People say you can't do that, you know, you're all supposed to specialize. Well, I do specialize, but in 24 years, the Navy sent me to a lot of very expensive postgraduate technical schools, and every one was a new subject. So it's not... I know, the mic went off. What you have to be ready for is when the mic goes off, I'm going to do the natural proportional response of an automatic response system, and I will raise the volume. And then it's going to hit you when the mic comes back on. So be ready for that. Anyway, the Navy sent me to a bunch of schools. I'm not a genius, and I don't do this because I made it all up. It's that they sent me to these schools, and that's why I have these little different subjects that I'm able to look up quickly. I'm not an expert in any of them. Now, a CEO of any company, that's the same agency owner here, me, agency owner, one person in the company, we all have the same thing, okay? We all need to do the things on this slide. But the only thing that's different for you, the only thing that's different between Bill Gates and you is the first line and the last line. The guy who has to report to shareholders, you know, Carly Fiorina at HP, before she decided to run to politics, she had to maximize profits for the shareholders. That was her objective. She was hired to do that, okay? And the problem is, in order to do that, that CEO has to depend on other people to get it done. So big, fancy companies that make a lot of money have this problem. They really don't have any control over the people who help them make the money, unless they're really amazing or they're small enough. And that's our problem. If we have a problem, we can adjust. You see, once we know the mechanics of running our company and we have all that stuff in the middle we're doing, we can quickly adjust. So the market goes down. Fine, I adjust, I bring my rates up, I bring them down like that. You know, this client is losing me money, I drop that client, pick up a different one. You know, we can react quickly. You believe me, when Volkswagen discovered that a couple of engineers in the company didn't do it right, they can't really react quickly, can they? They are going to have a nightmare that's going to go on for years. But if you and I discover that, you know, the computer doesn't work, well, you go out to Best Buy, we get another one, and in a couple of hours, we're back on the line again, all right? So we're flexible to an extent that people running bigger operations are not. But we're doing the same thing. Everybody running a company has to do what's on this slide. You'll notice I am not reading it to you. The other administrative note. English is my mother language, okay? I tend to get really excited up here, so I talk too fast. If I talk too fast, raise your hand, slow me down. If I'm turning around looking at the slides, throw something at me, okay? I do tend to talk too fast, and for that I'll apologize in advance. Now, the next slide is just some basic principles. First of all, when I first began doing this, it was a real problem getting people to get over the hang-up that's in the first bullet of this slide. But if you are not in this business to make money, you are not in business, okay? It's a hobby. And our tax agency, the Internal Revenue Service, takes a very dim view of people who turn in Schedule Cs on their tax return and are running a hobby, okay? So don't do hobbying. If you want this to be a business, you have to be in it for the money. Now, you don't have to make a lot of money, but you do have to be organizing your business to make some money. In fact, I'm very proud of the fact I run a nonprofit corporation. It's not a 501c, it just doesn't make much of a profit. Okay, because using the principles I'm going to teach you today, I don't need much of a profit. Everything I need is in my break-even point, so I don't need the extra stuff. If I had all that extra stuff, I'd just have to be giving it away, you know, like Bill Gates, you know. And you know what? That's a hassle. I don't need to worry about giving money away to all those people that want to see me. I mean, people say, oh, I wish I had that problem. No, I don't wish I had that problem. I want to get on my bicycle and go ride off in the woods. I don't want to figure out where to put my money. No, but you've got to be in business for the money. The second thing that's important is that, and this is the client education thing those of you who are new are going to hear this again and again, but those of you who haven't have heard it a lot already. Getting people to understand that we're charging for our expertise. That's what makes us professionals, okay? Not for the product. And one of the problems with those RFPs that those of you who went to the opening session heard about is that the government is classic at wanting something called deliverables. That's a technical term in government contracting. A deliverable is usually expressed as a magnetic tape in such and such a format containing the files, you know, a CD-ROM, delivered by electronic media in such a format. That's a deliverable. Well, how much is a couple of megabytes switching on a magnetic tape at the end of an email worth physically? Nothing. In the old days, we would literally send a diskette or a flash drive or something. How much is it worth? That's the deliverable in the federal contract. It's hard for them to understand that it's what's in there, the content, that creates the value, okay? And we charge for our expertise in creating that value, all right? And professionals, as a result, charge by unit of time. There isn't any other group that charges by unit of time, okay, that doesn't charge by unit of time. And translation is generally, believe it or not, should be billed by time. Now, if you're paid by cartella, which is a page, or line, like they do in Germany, or character, like they do in Japan, or word, like they do in North America, you're still being billed by time, because when you're done with this presentation, you're going to understand the key thing is how many of those units do you deliver in an hour, okay? So time is the key point, and that's what you're going to learn out of this. The last thing is a common sense thing. If you don't have a separate checking account and credit card for your business, do that as soon as you get home. Most of them are free. You can find a free checking account, a free credit card someplace, okay? Or if you want to get a rewards program like I do, fine, you know, but I use it because I stay in those hotels when I go to the conference. At the end of the business year, it's paid for my conference hotel. Cool, eh? So, but have a separate one, and then treat your business as if you were the agency owner here. You put your money into it, you take your money out when you want to use it for personal purposes, but you take it out as an owner's draw. Is that understood? Because this is what we're talking about. Any business has to do what's called cost accounting, all right? And any business has three elements of cost accounting that everybody has to take care of. Labor, operating cost for the business, you know, and growth and capitalization. And growth is very simply the fact, growth is something you have to work on even while you look like you're not growing. For example, I have 350 customers, and next year I have 350 customers. I worked on growth for, 10% growth. Wait a minute, you have the same number of customers. Yeah, I lost 10% of my customers and had to replace them. That's still growth. You're working on getting new customers all the time. Things wear out, you have to have capitalization. You have to have money in the bank to buy a new one when it wears out, so forth. I always explain that last line because it doesn't always hit people right away. Labor cost. Labor cost in any business is what you pay to people who do the work. In your case, the money you take out of the business. I said a separate checking account. That's called an owner's draw. You take the money out and you use it for whatever you want. You know, do not buy socks for your kid or soccer shoes for your daughter with your business account. You take the money out, you put it in your personal account, and then you go buy the soccer shoes, okay? That's how this works. But it's called an owner's draw, and this is an example of some of the things. Make up your own list. You're going to have to anyway when you're done with this talk. And for example, I don't have orthodontics on here. Anybody got a kid coming up through the prepubescent? Yeah. Someday you're going to have the $3,500, $4,000 orthodontics bill if you live in North America. So, you know, I don't have that up here. And other things. Whatever's important to you goes on this slide, all right? And that's what your business has to pay for, okay? You're taking money out of it to do this stuff. Is that clear? Okay. Now the business needs some money to run too, okay? And this stuff does get paid by the business checking account or the business credit card and then paid back by the checking card. And a good example of some of these things. I mean, if you travel around, if you're an interpreter, you're doing a lot of travel. You're probably putting mileage on your car. You probably have, like I do, I've got a Metro card for DC, Miami, New York, Rome, Florence. You know, I've got Metro cards. I just keep in my wallet because I'm going to be in that town. No point looking for a ticket. I just slip my Metro card, and when I get home online, I make sure if I'm going to that city that I've got some balance in it. But that's a business expense for me when I'm traveling. Okay, so I keep that up. Office supplies. Education's a very important line. This is an education expense for your business. The whole dang conference is. Now, if you've got a spouse off someplace, you know, taking the bus up to Disneyland with the kids while you're here, you better not pay her out of the business, or him. They got to take the kids on their own. But your part here and getting the hotel room and everything else, that's all a business expense because you're building value for your firm. And this is that growth and capitalization I was talking about. I put about 3% in my budget just to make sure I've got it, you know. So, but the way I do this is I go through the year, and at the end of the last quarter of the year, October, November, December, because I'm on a calendar basis. In December, I do a lot of my purchases by looking at what's in the business checking account, by looking at what I'm going to have to report to the IRS at the end of the year for profit, and I go spend it someplace. So I have a shopping list. When I first started out, I literally had a shopping list of all the gear I needed to run my business. You know, I really didn't want to keep using my employer's fax machine. This was pre-internet days. You know, sooner or later I had to stop using his computer and his fax machine and that sort of thing. I had to start using my own. But I made my business save the money up to buy it. And in December I would buy one more toy until I had everything I needed in my office. Is that making sense? And this way I not only made the business pay for itself, because I still had a day job, but as the business grew, at the end of the year, I would whittle my profit down so it was relatively minimal and didn't add to my tax burden. Is that making sense? So that's what I was doing with this. And most companies do something like that. They do spending near the end of the fiscal year for a reason. Go ahead, question. Please, when you're going to ask a question, you're really going to have to shout. It's an awfully big room. Marketing is an operating expense, usually. Unless you're going to buy something that's physically special, like, I don't know, a big plea. You're going to buy a bill. I don't know. If you're going to build a stadium, I guess it would be growth if you're going to build the stadium. But repainting the logo on the stadium would be an operating expense. Is that making sense? Okay, once you put it up, then keeping it running. For example, all the installation charges and all the stuff up front when you get a new cell phone, that's growth. Okay, that's capitalization, that's this. But your monthly phone bill, that's an operating expense. Is that making sense? Okay. All right, let's go to the next guy. Now, these two are really going to handle together, and that's pretty much how we're going to go, which is finding the break-even point, because in the process of finding the break-even point, we're going to see about time and management. Is your hand up in the back? Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. All right. Speaking of time, right off the top, there are 2,080 traditional work hours in a traditional work year using human resources specialist principles. 40-hour work week, 52 weeks. Everybody got it? Now, if everybody takes a 2-week vacation, because the United States is the only civilized country in the world that only gives 2 weeks to its employees, okay? But you only give us 2 weeks, great, that makes it 2,000. Look at that number 2,000 and see why HR specialists love it. Because if you get a salary of $50,000 a year, an HR specialist has $25 an hour in their head. Did you see how that worked? I'll do it the other way. Say you're making minimum wage, $10, $15 or something. Say $10 an hour. Click, you're making $20,000 a year. 20,000. You can divide by 2 and stick the zeros on it. Do you see how it works? So a traditional, when you're doing calculations of what your time is worth, and say you want to convert a salary that you're getting now in some kind of day job to what your freelance income would be, you're constantly talking about what you make by week or what you make per month or per year and trying to convert it into an hourly rate. And the way we're going to work this today, my principle, is to get everything on an annual basis, all the money you need to make for a year, and then divide it by how much time you have to make the business, make the money. Is that understood? That's the principle here. Please be aware of how little time you have to make it. You started out with 2080, and you really come down to having only about 1,300 hours in the year to do it. And that's if you're working full-time with nobody bothering you, okay? And you only don't get any sicker than the nominal amount. A government employee in Virginia is allowed to get sick for 10 hours a month, okay? And you get 8 hours a day for a holiday, so give yourself some holidays. You need to put those holidays and that sick time in there, and a little vacation time. Why? Because you are going to get sick. Why? Because one day you will fall in love and your partner is going to take a dim view of your working on holidays all the time, okay? You really need to take the holidays, okay? You need them. So build them into your plan and don't plan on working for them. Okay, having figured that out, here's how it works. I told you back on the labor draw, all the things you need. Remember that, the owner's draw where you had everything in there? I said, what about braces for the kids, all that stuff? The first thing you do when you're doing a budget to prepare for this is all the stuff you want life to buy for you, the money, okay? This is not the time to economize when you're doing this budget. I mean all the things. Say you want to go back to graduate school and it's going to cost a certain amount of money spread over a certain number of years. Say you do need a new car, but you would really get a nicer car, okay? Say you're having a child and you're going to want to send him to school, so now you want to have a certain number of dollars per year to put into a savings plan, okay? I didn't think I owed my kid college, so I wound up having to borrow money to give him room and board in college. But put in your dreams. Put in everything you want life to buy for you, whether it's going to be your day job or you're translating and interpreting. I mean, either one or both, or you want to go full-time someday. That's not the point. The point is put everything you need to spend in a year, you need money to buy in a year, into your plan. Draw it all up, and that's the amount of money you need to make. Now you add business expenses, because you do the same thing for the business. How much is the phone bill going to be for a year? How much is the internet service? How much am I spending on travel? How much is it going to take to go to the ATA conference or buy the books and dictionaries? Do the same thing for the business. Put in a kicker for capitalization. I use 3%. And then you add your admin. That's overhead at the bottom, okay? And what you wind up with is a number at the end, okay? You don't have to put the admin in, you do that with the time, but you add the business expenses and the personal expenses up. And do not economize at this step everything that you really want it to do for you someday. You can have a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year window if you want, but make sure you don't cut back. Don't start thinking economizing. Don't worry about what you can make yet. Get that number together and add it up. And I suggest you do it for a whole year. So if you know that your bill is so-and-so a month, like for your heat bill is so-and-so a month, good. Well, multiply by 12. Put it in the spreadsheet. Remember I mentioned spreadsheets? Okay, put it in the spreadsheet. And then what you do is you simply find out how much it is. Our nominal translator for this drill is going to be going to need $50,000, okay? It's a newbie, starting out, $50,000, all right? Now remember, I said this is the business and the family expenses. So if it's a single person, not making a big house payment, but having to pay off a student loan, that might be a good number. I don't know. I made it up. Euros, okay? I didn't make it up to be anything fancy. It's just easy to work with. Okay. Now, then you find out how much you have to make. You divide it by the number of hours, last slide, and you have how much you have to charge. Break-even point is what that's called. It's your labor rate. If this hypothetical interpreter is making less than $39.84, always jack it up. So $40 an hour is what this person has to consider as their break-even point. Does everyone see how that works? Now look at the danger if you don't take those time elements into account in the other slide. If you need to make $40 an hour and you're thinking you need to make 25, you are going to go into bankruptcy, okay? Because you will not have the hours to make it. Now, you can work overtime if you want, but you can't keep that up. And we're standing here in this room hoping to make this for the long haul, aren't we? Is anyone here doing this just for a summer job? I forgot to ask that question. Okay, I wasn't either. Been doing it for 53 years. I haven't stopped yet. So you really want to keep that in mind. So this person has a break-even point of $40 an hour. That, my friends, is a secret number. That's the one you lock in a lead box and you hire a Marine Guard to watch, okay? You do not let anyone know that number. That's your break-even point. But it's an extremely important number for you because that's the number that when you're on the telephone to a client trying to set up an interpreting gig and they say they want to let you work and it comes out to less than that, you say, sorry, I really have another engagement this week and I can't make that one. I say, sorry, I've got another client. By the way, you know something? I never say no to a customer. I never say no. I say I have another client, I'm too busy, I really can't work on it right now, or I'm sorry, I took another job just before you called. I don't say no. And I usually give them the names of some colleagues who can do it. Now, if they're trying to lowball me, I warn them that the colleagues are probably going to cost the same as I do, but here's some names of people who could do it. I'm just not your person this week. I'm busy. But the point is $40 an hour is what this person has in the back of their head to do it. Obviously, you're going to advertise a different rate. Oh, my rate's $45, my rate's $50 an hour. You see how that works? You don't get anywhere close to it in what you tell people you work for. And if you go on my website, it's on the card, you'll find my rates are posted. And those rates are what I call a starting point for negotiations. They're nowhere near my break-even point. I'm not letting them know what that is, okay? But what we can do is talk about it from there, and I can give them a little and look like a good guy, or I can jack it up if they've been terrible the last time and tell them I've raised my rates, But you can then, does everyone understand that? This is not your advertised price. Now, when you get to this point, okay, a couple of things have happened. You now know how much money you need to make to accomplish your dreams, okay? One. You know that you can do that working a standard 40-hour week. Now, as a freelancer, you can do it anytime you want to, but that's nice. But you still only have to work 40 hours a week to do this, all right? And that's important because now you look at that and you say, I'll never make $40 an hour. How do you know? Have you ever asked anybody to pay you $40 an hour? No, maybe not, maybe yes. I don't know. Maybe you're already making more than that. Let's say this person's going to start out, okay, $50 an hour is a good number for this person, right? 5 or 10 more than what they really need to make, okay? $50 an hour allows them to negotiate, and they can talk. And if you're thinking, oh, I'll never make that just because you never have made that kind of money before, well, think about it. Maybe you should be. There are strategies, it would take too long to do it because they're very individual, for raising your rate. Okay, so say you're already charging $30 an hour and you go, oh, I need to get to 50, all right? I need to get up. Well, you can do a very quick, going 5 to 10, you can do that over just a couple of price changes. One tactic, not a strategy, is when you submit an invoice and you've just done this drill at the old rate, you let them know, by the way, my prices are going up. We've done a price review here at the firm, and we're going to be raising our rates. It's going to cost $35 an hour next time, and we'll probably be raising them over the course of the next year because we're going to do some expansion, which you are, because you just took all the dreams you weren't ready to pay for, and you put them into the business. And so now this is an expansion. So warn them when you give them an invoice that you're going to be raising the rates next time slightly. And then on an individual customer, you don't scare them off, but they come to you. Did you raise your hand? Please, speak up. What about taxes? They're in there. You'll see them on a spreadsheet coming up. Right now, I'm teaching the principles of what we're doing. The question was, do you put taxes in there? And the answer is yes, and I'll get the detailed spreadsheet in just a minute. But I just wanted to point that out. This is your break-even point, and you need to charge a little bit more than that. Now, if you're an interpreter in North America, you get paid by the hour anyway. If you're a translator, you have to do something else, like hit the screen right. Yeah, calculating the break-even point. Converting the labor rate to a piece rate. The word is what we call a piece rate. For example, Cesar Chavez and his workers were being paid by the bushel of grapes, okay? You better believe the padron knew how many grapes each of them could pick in an hour, and that's how the price is determined. Still a time-based unit, even though they were paid by the bushel. We get paid by the word, it's still a time-based unit. Just look at the slide, okay? Now, what you need to know is how long it's going to take you to complete a job, which means that the translator being paid by the word or a piece rate needs another level of complication in there. You need to know how fast you work for a given type of project, for a given client. In other words, how much time does it cost, do you waste with this client? So you need to know how long it's going to take you to do it. But the principle is, you know how long it'll take you to do the job, and on this slide it's 12 hours, okay, and $40 is the break-even point, right? So, and it's a 4,000 word job. For this job, you need to ask for at least 12 cents a word. Now, if 12 cents a word, to those of you who haven't been doing this for a long time, looks like a high rate, you need to look at your bottom line and go through this drill, okay? Now, I am not saying a word about what other people charge. Can you see how this principle has nothing to do with anyone else? It's not finding out what the going rate is. It's not, am I too high or too low? The only question you need to ask is, am I making enough to accomplish my dreams? That's the only question you need. And that question is very personal for every person in this room. And is absolutely not market-based. Other factors will come in later. But to succeed at this business, as Corinne's book points out, to succeed at this business, you need to answer these questions for yourself, and everything else above it, you're just working the flow, okay? And you can take the stress out of your life. But you need to get to this point, if you're not there, of getting above your break-even point. And that's pretty straightforward. Now, how do you find out how fast you work? Well, you need to do some record keeping, okay? And yes, this is a spreadsheet. And the way it works, quite basically, is that I've got cells in here. If I got a mouse that can point, there we go. I have cells in here that at the bottom calculate what's at the top, okay? And then they figure it out. There's averages in there. And I bet you can pick your own. I recommend that if you're not going to use one of the ready-made software programs, and you might not want to, if you're familiar with spreadsheets, go ahead and set something like this up. And this is all being recorded, so it'll be on the DVD if you want to look at it later. But my spreadsheet hasn't changed much. I've got more columns now than I used to, but it's the same idea. I give it a job number, and the date that I billed it, and what I charged, and the word count. And of course, you just multiply the word count by the rate, and you get the revenue, right? Or the service hours by the service rate. I have two columns I have a column for hourly rate now, and you get the revenue and the number of hours I spent on it, and the dollars per hour I made, making sure that I'm above my break-even point, and it doesn't look anything like the break-even point in my slides. I made these numbers up too. And the words per hour, which was crucial, isn't it? We need to know how fast we translate if we're going to have to do this. So you wind up, this particular translator's averaging 388 words an hour. But see how different the spreads are. One of them's almost up at 600 words an hour, and one's down at 322 words per hour. So you need to know what kind of work you work faster on. I mean, when I'm doing an annual report that I've done for a company for many, many years, and I've got the translation memory all slicked because I don't have to go back and teach my dictation, and my dictation tool has heard it 15 times, it's got it wired, I can get some really high rates, even with the revision time, okay? So next to it, I have notes. I've got something about the job that reminds me later of what that job was. So if I see that kind of job later, I can go not to the average at the bottom, but to the average up on the line. Does that make sense? And that's how I keep my rating going. So client XYZ calls me up, I'll give them a quote because I have a feeling. And I always make an estimate for every job that they have to approve before I start work. I send them the estimate, they approve it, I start working. They have to approve it. I put a lot of things in the estimate. It's not a big voluminous, it's only a page, but there's some important stuff there like the terms of payment, and what the rate is and how big the job is and what the deadline is and that sort of thing. And little notes like US Standard Plain Legal English, comma, Microsoft 2013, comma, Standard ISO currency codes and international date format. They better tell me they want US civilian because the estimate is for, day, month, year, not month, day, year. Okay, so I tell them up front what the estimate is for so that they can look at it and say, oh, no, we want month, day, year. So that sort of thing, okay. Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
I have a number of direct clients who really take their time paying.
Direct clients taking time paying you.
90 days or more.
How many?
90 or more.
Okay. I'm going to tell you a sea story. You need to educate your client. That's wonderful. And I can say that up here and I can be as pompous as you like. Okay. However, here's what I did with my one client who... I know, we lost it. Here it comes. Here it comes. Hey guys, can we do better? I'll bet my... Does this do it again? Does it go out of... Does it? No? I always thought maybe my computer was interfering. I had a client that did that, and that client also wanted special rates. Okay, they would pay me 4 months late, which meant the terms were, 20% per annual percentage rate, for overdue payments, and a finance charge. And twice I've actually been able to collect a finance charge for a late paying client. But what I did with this one client is they wanted special rates that would just be pre-negotiated. We don't want to dork around. Well, nice thing is all they ever did was the same kind of work, financial translation, almost always annual reports, sometimes legal briefs, okay? So I went, okay, you can have a special rate. It'll be just your rate from you and me. We won't have to hassle anymore, and you don't have to worry about people, wanting more, wanting less. It's a special rate for you. And I added a cent per minute, cent per word, because that's what the actual annualized cost of my lending the money for 4 months was. And I stopped whining about being paid late. They didn't notice I stopped whining. They were real happy with their special rate. And I haven't raised it for 6 or 7 years now, because that's how screwed up they were. But now what happens is they still pay me net. They pay me 90 days after the end of the month of the invoice. And early in the month, that turns into a 4-month gig, right? But I don't worry about it because I'm charging them more than I'm charging anyone else, and they don't know it. But they're paying for my lending them money. You understand lending money? When they don't pay you, you're actually supporting their operating capital. They're paying other bills with the money they haven't paid you, and the money's sitting in the bank getting interest. Their bank, not yours. So that's what the problem with late payments is on a business level, okay? Now, with other clients, having the terms in the estimate is very important. Net 30 is the standard, worldwide standard in Europe and North America for terms for payment. It's required by law in Europe, by the way, but nobody in Italy, for example, pays any attention to it, whereas in Germany and France and England, they do. But net 30 from date of invoice is the standard thing, and it's in there, net 30 date of invoice. If it's in the estimate, then 6 weeks, 8 months, 8 weeks later, you can go back and say, I must have missed your check. Please let me know what check number it was and where you said to make sure we posted it correctly. I didn't accuse them of not paying me. But most of the time, that gets them scrambling because they've got to answer the email because the next one's going to the head of the firm, okay? So those are some of the strategies I've used in the past. But what was crucial is I warned them in the estimate before I started working what the terms of payment were. They come back to me, some of them say, well, we only pay net 45. I said, well, I don't accept net 45. Now you have to make a decision now. Is this customer worth the hassle? Or can you put up with it? Now, the one I told you I don't overcharge. I make them pay for the lending of money. The neat thing about them is I can count on their paying me 4 months late. They really meet their own terms. I got a couple of customers who pay me net 45 no matter what I put on my invoice. But they really do pay me net 45. And once they slipped and forgot, and they were totally apologetic. They had it in the mail by express mail. I mean, so some of them, you got to look at their behavior. If you are in this business for the long haul, you have to get used to having a stream of checks coming in for work you did some time ago. And that's how your cash flow goes. And that's why I recommend doing all this on an annual basis. But you have to realize you need 3-4 months of operating funds in your business checking account and your personal checking account if it's your only job to make this work, because you're going to have periods where it gets down low and then all of a sudden the checks come, and it does this all the time. And as long as it keeps doing this and doesn't do that, in other words, it doesn't go negative on you, then you're okay. Is that making sense? Okay, we're going to move right along here. I haven't shown you anything useful in a long time. Here's a useful slide. This is actually more about, you need to revise your work to make sure the quality stays up, don't you? Yeah, something like that. Now, we've only got about 12 minutes before this siren goes off. So what I'm going to do is make sure I've covered your questions and hit those, because they're pretty much the practical stuff I was going to talk about anyway. But thinking I'm pricing too low, too high. Do you see where it doesn't make a difference? If you're just starting out, once you know what your translation rate is, don't worry about whether it's too low or too high. What you need to ask is, am I getting called too much? Am I turning down more work than I can accept because I'm working full time and the phone keeps ringing? I've got a lot of friends in this ATA here who literally turn their phones off while they're working. They can't take the phone calls. And they don't check their email until they take a break. I mean, they have to, because the email's full of people who want them to work. Believe it or not, you can get to that position very quickly because you position yourself to do quality work, okay? That's one tip. So if they're calling you a lot, it might mean you're pricing a little low and everybody wants your work, okay? Assuming that you really know you do good work with a good revision and everything. So if they keep coming back, you're doing fine. They won't complain if you raise the rate a little bit, so do, okay? And then raise it a little more if it doesn't. You know, then when you see a drop off, and what's going to happen is as you raise the rate, I could be wrong, individual basis, but as you raise the rate, the ones who are the biggest pain in the butt are the ones who drop out first. You know, the high maintenance customer is usually the one that's also the low ball. They whine about the rate, they try to get a deal, they're disorganized, they give you the call on Friday for something due Monday all the time. You know, when you're starting out, you have to take a few of those. But those are the ones that are always looking at how much you charge per word, and they aren't looking at your quality. Well, you start raising what you charge per word, and they go away. And what I've got left is nothing but some really nice, solid clients that I wish I could say yes to. But I've been doing this for a long time now, okay? You don't get there right away, but you could. I know a few people who only work about 2-3 years, and they're up there because they do top-notch work, and I recommend them to my customers. So if you're charging too little, it'll be obvious to you. Everybody's calling you, including the idiots and the lowballers and the envelope switchers. Everybody know what an envelope switcher is? Because that's a paradigm from the old days before the internet. They're the people who used to take your translation, which came in by mail, right? Take it out of the envelope, stick it in the envelope with their logo on it, mail it off, and never even look at it. It's called an envelope switcher. It's the ultimate lowball for quality because nobody's checked your translation, okay? And now we call them bottom feeders because they only care about how much you charge per word and they never look at your quality. They will drop out first and then you find a nice happy average. If nobody's calling you at all, then maybe it is too high. Trust me, you probably won't get to that point right away if you're doing quality work. Now there's a responsibility you have. You've got to provide quality. Make sense? You got to know that you're getting revised. And when revision is offered to you, you go, wow, thanks. By the way, 1 in 100 clients is going to call you with feedback, let you know what you actually missed. Be very grateful when they do because they care about your translation work. It means that the rest of it was really good, okay? And they want to keep you. That's why they give you feedback. Agency owner, am I right? You like the good ones, so you give them feedback, okay? So don't ever think a call telling you what you did wrong is bad news unless they say they won't pay you. Now they're playing a game. That's another story. And billing and collection. I give you a little bit of a hint where I call them and remind them of the terms in a nice way that doesn't accuse them. And then the next time I say, by the way, I still haven't seen the check. And I've gotten to the point of saying, by the way, I'm going to a collection agency. You know, you can do that. ATA has one on the hook. That costs 40 cents on the dollar. That's a 40% hit. So you need to really be into a big bunch of bucks to the company to have to threaten to go to collection with it. But it's a threat. The other threat I have, and I'll give you this real quickly, you own your copyright, translation copyright. So if this document looks like something they're making money on, or they're putting it on the web, for example, and I put on website translations not to be published, which means not to be uploaded until I'm paid in full. And I don't work for hire, but what I do is I put in a phrase that's almost the same thing. Translation copyright transfers automatically upon payment of invoice in full. And then I see it on the web and I call them up and say, you didn't read the estimate. You are not to put that on the internet until I've been paid. Your customer needs to know that. If you do not take it down immediately, I'm going to call your customer and ask them to pay me because they don't own that material. And that's gotten me a check every time. Now, happened maybe 6 times in a career that spans about 38 years of doing this, okay? So it's not something that happens every day and you gotta really know what you're doing. You gotta be really confident, but it's there as a principle of the business that you own your copyright, and that is the goods. In a contract, you bring goods or services in exchange for consideration, which is the money, okay? Bringing to a contract, what do we bring to a contract? The author owns the words. We bring the translation. So we own that translation if we don't work for hire. We own that translation until we're paid. That completes the contract. Well, the contract isn't completed until I get paid. So I can actually tell my client, I'm sorry, but I'm going to Pirelli, the tire maker, and I'm going to ask their accounts payable department to pay this bill because I haven't been settled and they think they own it. And they can't use that booklet, you know, they can't use that technical manual in their factory until I get paid. Really embarrass your client. They don't want that. In Italian companies, I work in Italian, big on not being embarrassed. They don't like doing the brutta figura, so I usually get my money. I don't recommend that as a general strategy, but I'm giving you an idea how it can work, okay? That don't involve a collection agency. And how to get started? Well, you're already here, so you've made the best start you possibly can, okay? Network with others, meet some people. If you are a newbie and you don't have a buddy, go find one. You can just collar anybody who does not have a little pink slip saying first-hand attendee and ask them stuff. Am I right, those of us who have been here before? I mean, if a first-time attendee wants to know something, are you willing to help them? All right, everybody tell me no. No, they'll help you. They really will. We all like each other. And let me tell you a basic principle of our business, and I don't care what you read anywhere else. We are not competitors. Does everyone understand that? There are not enough qualified translators and interpreters in this country. There just aren't. My God, we don't have enough bilinguals in America to do our daily business. The country's a wreck because it can't talk to each other. I mean, Spanish is going to be a majority language here in another 10 years, and the country isn't even getting it. You know what I mean? So we are not competitors. There's too few of us to be competitors. There is no language pair in this association where we have to worry about somebody else getting my job. If somebody else gets your job because you're charging a fair rate for quality work, you don't want that client. All right? That client is going to make you lose money with all the time you're going to waste on them. Because you're going to spend time in billings and collection. Yes, Tony? No. Right. Right. Oh, yes. Tony's brought up an excellent point. Trust me, get to know the other members because, and here's, here's the key thing on referrals. Beautiful thought. There's 2 things the way referrals work, or 3 things. But one of them is that by knowing people in the ATA, and I've got people I just met a month ago that I'm sending referrals to because their work is so good, okay? And I found out about them through the ATA. And I read the accreditation announcements in the Chronicle. And now that we're offering Italian English again, I got new people I can refer because I usually refer to certified translators. That's what my customers want. And I say, oh, you want to talk to Gay Grider? He said, well, yeah, she's got to be good. She's a lawyer. Because I'll go look up their resume, having seen the announcement that they passed the certification exam and are now certified. I'll look up their resume, and usually it's awesome, okay? Those are the kind of people that are in this association. We've all got awesome resumes, believe it or not. We really do. Compared to anyone in our age, education level, across the board, our resumes look pretty good, or we wouldn't be in this room, trust me. So referrals work that way, you know, that you get to know each other and you make referrals. And I don't charge for referrals. My customers now call me all the time, even when I'm too busy, and they know it. You know, some of the ones in New York drive me nuts. One day in an ATA conference, I said, hey, why do you guys keep calling me? I mean, I told Sandra I'm busy, and you work right next to her, because I do visit my customers and I find out what it looks like inside. As you work right next to her, you go, oh, we always call you, Jonathan. I says, why? He says, because we know that within 1 or 2 phone calls, we're going to get the job placed. You're going to give us 4 or 5 names, and one of them will work. I says, oh, I can handle that. You know, they're always calling me first. It's like right of first refusal. But the fact is, the referral thing works. The other referral thing that's really handy is that, oh boy, I'm losing it here in my head a minute, summertime. In June, if you work a European language, there's a lull in July, August, starts in June. All the old hands like me go on vacation. If you follow my blog, you'll notice I ride my bicycle around, and then I suddenly start riding more. I stop working for a while, okay? Well, people can call me all day long. They're going to get the autoresponder or the vacation response that says, I'm sorry, I'll be back online on the 28th of August, you know, or something like that, okay? That's when they call the next person in their old-fashioned Rolodex, or today on their spreadsheet, or whatever the automatic dialing for the project manager is. Then they go to the next person in line because their regular first one isn't available. And that's where you need to be if you're a newbie. How to start? You be available during vacation periods. Now, if you are in the happy situation where, you know, you don't really care about Saturdays and Sundays, maybe you go to church on Friday. You know, all of our Arabic friends do that. That's cool. You know, you go to church on Friday, Saturday and Sunday is nothing to you. Pick up all that Friday phone calls that are due on Monday, you know, have a ball if you're free to do it. Depends on where you live and what your work schedule looks like. But the point is, as freelancers, you're flexible and you can do things. Just don't work 7 days a week. If you're going to work a weekend, then take Monday and Tuesday off. Or find out what your dull day is, like a restaurant does, and close those 2 days. You know what I mean? So there are ways you can work that one. And thanks, Tony, for bringing that up. We have about a minute left, and I think I did cover all of your questions. I have a couple of important things to let you know, and that is that. Most important slide of all. And fun does not mean happy, happy, glad, always smiling. It means you genuinely enjoy what you're doing. Just like a soccer player who comes off with a sprained ankle and a busted lip, they carry him off in a stretcher and he says, damn, that was a great game. You know, I have to ask myself, but I know what that soccer player means. You know, I'm done with this horrible financial report, 5,000 words over the weekend, you know, and I turn the dang thing at 3 in the morning and I stagger back to bed and I say, wow, I can't believe I got that done, you know. It was very satisfying to me to meet a challenge that couldn't be met, you know, that people thought couldn't be done. So if you like your work, you're doing fine. If you're not having fun, look at how you're doing it. Reach out and ask somebody, should I be doing something different, okay? Is there something that's more fun in the same industry? Could I be, maybe I don't like translating, maybe I want to be an interpreter, or maybe I don't like interpreting, I should have been a translator. My brain splits when I do interpreting, stuff like that. There you go. We're just about done here, so I am going to, we got 1 minute to go. I told you it would go off. But it's important to be having fun, to enjoy what you're doing. And one of the results of doing this financial analysis and finding your break-even point and then working at it for a while is you may make an economic decision that, you know, I got something else I really like to do just as much and it pays more. I'm never going to make it on this particular way. I don't, you know, my life situation is I don't want to give up the things it takes to do this. But at least you make that decision with a solid economic basis for it, okay? I really don't want to do this anymore. This isn't going to work, okay? Or if you go into this line of work, here's a good example. You're starting out, right out of college, right? You went and majored in languages, which means you know nothing in 2 languages. You didn't major in chemistry or finance or get a law degree. No, you majored in French. So you know nothing in French and English. You can translate nothing back and forth. You know what I'm talking about? Subject matter expertise. I'm not taking questions because we're done. Okay, you'll have to see me later. But the point I'm getting at is you might make an economic decision a couple of years out of college that, okay, I'm going to go back to school and take a full degree in my minor, or I'm going to go get a job at Boeing and learn about aerodynamics, or we'll learn about machine manufacturing or something like that. I'm going to take a manufacturing job for a couple of years and then come back to this, knowing how to do that. You get my point? With a day job so that you can build a 10-year plan of how your translation agency is. Been a translator for 53 years. I've only been full-time for 38. Now, that both of those numbers are fairly big, but you got to realize that was a lot of time I had a day job. I spent a lot of time doing something else. I was a student, a naval officer, a university administrator, a graduate student, all that stuff. And then I stayed in the basement and continued translating. So you may make an economic decision to just continue your present relationship and make this part-time with a growth pattern to it. And I had a 10-year business plan when I set up my company, not a 5-year one. Okay, get the picture? That's about all I can flap my jaws for. Thank you very much. Take a card if you want to. And if you really like my jokes, you can see them again tomorrow. I'm doing something else twice, 2 different presentations. Thank you very much.